Before we get into the stories, I would like to let you all know that I'm taking story submissions to narrate. I will credit you in the description of the video unless you ask me not to, so if you have an experience or story in mind that you would like me to read, then you can email me at feedingonfear@gmail.com, and I will be sure to include it in my videos. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the stories. Ghost stories? Nah, we don't have anything like that around here. What we do have is the story of Jacob, but that's about as close as you'll get. So, you really want to hear it? I'm not exactly supposed to tell you, but alright, just don't interrupt me. I don't have the patience for it. How to describe Jacob Emory? Well, I guess you could say he was the kind of guy you could never take notice of. This isn't to say he was a bad kid in any sense. Many people in this town thought he was the most reliable person for an odd job in the state. But he never really excelled in anything. He was the living proof behind the statement, "Jack of all trades, master of none." Most of this was due to his own lack of will. He dabbled in damn near anything this town could offer him. Automobiles, radio operations, store management, what have you. But he never stuck with anything. His friends and workers went after him about it a number of times, but everybody got the same unsatisfying response. It just wasn't enough. Needless to say, any friends he kept were either very patient or never spoke of the matter altogether. It was probably inevitable then that Jacob would leave to go abroad. I don't remember where he went. I think Gertrude down the street knew before she passed on. You'll have to scout someone else if you ever get curious. In any case, nobody tried to stop him. Everybody thought that a little travel would stamp the ambition out of him, or else feed it until it was no longer an issue. Hell, we even gave him a sending-off party, which I thought was pretty nice. So, he was gone for 6 or 7 years, I can't really remember. You'll have to check with someone else about that too. Anyways, he came back eventually, and he was changed. He was different. This time he was amiable, energetic. He was all smiles all the time, and we all quickly learned exactly why. He showed us a souvenir he'd brought back. A solid black stick, the length of a pencil, but with the texture of chalk. We all wondered why on earth such a simple thing like that would prompt such a spring in his step, until he gave his demonstration. He took a piece of paper, and with this stick, he drew a crude circle. It dropped and rested on the border of the paper like a stone. It didn't leave the paper, but it acted out on it, like an old movie projector on a screen. I know how crazy that sounds. And if you feel like playing skeptic, then you can leave an old man to his craziness. But I know what I saw, even if everyone's been hushing it up. That stone that he drew dropped. Jake even passed around the paper, and as it was being passed, it rolled around as the paper was tilted. None of us had any words for it. What could you even say to that? But Jacob continued drawing demonstration after demonstration for us. Stick figures in various pageants and plays, doing everything from fighting each other to making perfect human pyramids. We all thought it was incredible. That was all the go-ahead he needed. He announced that he planned to put on shows to pay for rent and food, where he would draw anything the crowd members wanted. That we talked to some length about, and he eventually convinced us that it would be safe. His drawings ethical, the practice lucrative and unique, and that the attention would not go anywhere outside of the town's borders. Poor Jacob. If I'd not been so swept up in the moment, I might have read the signs right then and there, and saved the sorry son of a bitch by snapping that terrible instrument in half. But I was younger, we all were, and we saw no problem with encouraging him with what we perceived as an incredible experience to be shared with everybody else. Now, Jacob didn't have any big radio or television connections, and the internet wouldn't come around for another decade, so he did what all people on a shoestring budget do. He advertised his show with flyers. Flyers might not mean anything to you city folk, but in a small town they gain a fair glance. And what's more, Jacob's managed to stick out by having little figures jump up and down and whatnot to get people's attention. His first show must have gotten nearly 60 or so people, probably a lot more than that. And his shows were fantastic. Someone would shout out a scene from a play or a comedy sketch, and Jake's hand would fly over a white wall like a bird. He'd been holding back when he made that stone. That's for damn sure. His illustrations were all spot on, and he could make an incredible human figure in 10 minutes come to life. I don't remember any of his scenes lasting more than 10 minutes to make. They were all really well done scenes too as well. Not only could you see a knight charge a castle, but Jake would draw the castle's interior as well, like a wedding cake split down the middle. That way you could see the knight scale the walls, fight his way through the levels to the dungeon, fight back out with the princess, and make a leaping jump off castle parapets onto his getaway horse, all in complete silence. Not realistic, no, but that was part of the appeal. None of us went in there expecting something real. When a scene or a sketch was finished, either the characters would leave off a wall, or he'd cover the wall with white paint. This was good, in a way. It gave these shows a time limit, so that when he'd finished with all the 4 walls in the room, everyone knew the show was over until the paint dried. Jake, meanwhile, was changing in a bad way. I'd mentioned that upon his return he'd been extremely energetic. Well, that energy, that vitality or vigor, it never left him, not for an instant. Far from it, in fact. It seemed to grow within him, and he enjoyed it all too much. His eyes grew wider. He slept gradually less over time. His statements and opinions became more radical and frenzied, and though he never was a pushover, he was starting to make people nervous in his company. A month or 2 passed, and Jake's audience grew like a wildfire. Nearly everyone in the town paid to see his art in action, and he had to rent out larger and larger places for them to sit. He now didn't stop after one scene was done. He moved directly on to the next, drawing on another blank space of the wall, sometimes to the intriguing effect of causing scenes to mingle, which the crowd absolutely adored. The subject matter of his art became more wild and immoral too. The monsters got more bizarre and creative, and the fighters used more impossible weaponry, all for the sake of appeasing the crowd's interests. Jake got steadily more indulgent, which we figured was from the money. He became a drinker and a womanizer. Some of these women claimed that they'd woken up in the middle of the night to see him scribbling with that stick on a drawing pad, some stupid grin on his face. While most of the women said that they'd assumed he was drawing them in the nude, rumors exist that 1 or 2 of them managed glances at that notepad, and those anonymous few supposedly said that those drawings absolutely were not nude pictures. But neither of them, whoever they are, will say what it was. Don't bother looking for the notepads or flyers, though. Those are all gone now. But I'm getting off track. The point is he was hitting the bottle, and that's important, because it was that drinking that would eventually ruin everything. On the night of one of his performances, as he walked in front of the cheering crowd, it was immediately apparent to everybody that he was completely drunk. I was in the front row and I could smell the bourbon on him from 10 feet away. The show started. He went through a bunch of sketches and scenarios the crowd recommended, and at the end, someone asked that he draw himself. Everyone cheered at the idea. I guess they'd been wondering what his creations thought of him. Jake eventually obliged. No sooner had he finished connecting the final 2 lines on his coat than every single character across the vast, expansive wall all stopped and looked directly at that illustration. Lovers stopped kissing, clowns stopped laughing, robots stopped fighting pirates. Everything halted and looked at the Jacob illustration. The crowd died down almost instantly. I remembered Jake's face at that moment. He was pale and white, full of terrible comprehension of his mistake, and looking desperately for the cans of white paint that he'd forgotten to put out before the show. Everybody else was looking at the fake Jacob. That one reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a black stick of his own, and as we all watched, he drew a door. He pushed on his side and the door swung open, allowing him to walk through onto the floor of the auditorium. The rest of the night was absolute pandemonium. People screamed and ran for the exits at Jacob's characters, both those currently on the wall and those which had previously been left before being covered up ran out of their own exit, throwing pies, shooting lasers, blowing fire and poison, and the impossible. I was near enough the exit to escape and gave only one backwards glance. That scene will haunt me until I die. Jacob Emory was being dragged by his creations, kicking and screaming through the door his copy had created. The auditorium burned down, but I have no idea how many characters escaped. What happened to the fake Emory, or how many people died? The blaze brought the fire department from the nearest cities up to over 100 miles away, and they in turn brought the police, which brought the government, which hushed up everything. They took the flyers away and any art Jake had made and swore everyone to secrecy, or else life in prison. The fire was blamed on an unextinguished cigarette in the garbage during a basketball game, and we all eventually went on with our lives, and Jacob was made to have never existed. In retrospect, I realize everything. Jacob hadn't been creating illustrations. Illustrations don't move, much less act or attack. They're just images people see. Shadows made to look like real things. Jacob had been making life, actual thinking things, in some alternate dimension, using a power that was never meant to fall to mortal hands. He got drunk on his power, and his punishment was probably well-deserved. Incidentally, the government screwed up on 2 different accounts. They did a damn good job silencing everyone. But proof remains. The ruins are still there, you know. The auditorium's ruins. I hear they're gonna start reconstruction soon, which will wipe out any remaining evidence anyone could find. I went back there once, several years after the fire, just once. Amidst the rubble and covered in ash, I saw something squirming. I looked closer, and it was Jacob Emory's hand on the wall, exactly like it had been 3 years ago. But it was constantly flailing, as if the body it was supposed to be attached to was still writhing in flames. That was mistake number 1. Number 2 was those creations. Like I said, I don't know how many escaped, nor how many the government agents found and caught. But I will say only this: those tall grass meadows on the outskirts of town. You don't want to go into them, ever. You were asking about those white figures you've seen at night, right? This town doesn't have ghost stories.